Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to dive deep into what is absolutely the ultimate cinematic Icarus story of modern football. We're looking at how the greatest underdog triumph the sporting world has literally ever seen eventually crashed headfirst into a cold, unforgiving financial reality. Now, this isn't just a simple story about winning a shiny trophy. It's a comprehensive look at how a club scales the absolute peak of the mountain, only to find out that the air up there is incredibly thin and the drop back down, well, it's steeper and faster than anyone could have ever imagined. The greatest fairy tale in football didn't last forever. Let's just sit with that quote for a second, because it perfectly sets the stage for our entire story today. It's a deeply emotional narrative that begins with pure, unadulterated magic, but slowly and painfully unravels into a bureaucratic and financial nightmare. Think back to 2016. A team no one believed in, a club with absolutely zero history of modern dominance, actually did the unthinkable. It was the kind of story that reminded the entire world exactly why we fall in love with football in the first place, because in that fleeting moment, anything truly felt possible. But as you'll see, maintaining a fairy tale in the ruthless, money-driven modern era of sports is an entirely different beast than writing one. Section 1. The greatest fairy tale.
To really understand the sheer scale of the fall, we have to pause and remember the incredible heights of their unbelievable rise. 6 years before their title, the club was taken over by their beloved owner, Thai businessman Khun Vishai. The ascent was crazy fast. By 2014, they won promotion to the Premier League. In 2015, they pulled off a miraculous escape from relegation that honestly seemed mathematically impossible for months. And then came 2016. The world-famous fairy tale title. You have to remember, before this miracle, Leicester City were just another team fighting to survive, just hoping for mid-table security. Literally no one expected greatness from them. And honestly, maybe that complete lack of pressure is exactly what made it possible. Because with no pressure comes a profound sense of freedom, and with freedom comes an unshakable belief.
Section 2. Heroes of the Miracle.
But this miracle wasn't just some abstract concept. It was built on the backs of some very special players. What's really interesting here is how 3 completely different profiles combined to create a tactical system that absolutely terrified the established elite. You had Jamie Vardy, relentless, fearless, constantly running beyond his own physical limits to chase down every single lost cause. Then you had Riyad Mahrez out on the wing, creative, completely unpredictable, capable of pulling a moment of pure magic out of thin air to win a tight game. And anchoring the whole shebang in the midfield, you had N'Golo Kanté, quiet, almost invisible off the pitch, yet absolutely everywhere on it. Together, they formed a unit that didn't just play a game of football, they actively fought for it, every single tackle, every single counterattack.
So what does this all mean for the future? Well, success changes absolutely everything. Suddenly, the whole world is celebrating your victory. Expectations rise exponentially, and the pressure dramatically increases. The underdog is no longer invisible. They become a massive target. Opponents adapt to your tactics, they study your patterns, and they prepare specifically to neutralize you. And inevitably, as that original spark became to fade, key players like Conte and eventually Mahrez moved on to larger clubs. So Leicester City was suddenly forced into a really tough spot. They had to figure out how to evolve, how to rebuild a system, and how to find a new identity without losing their soul in the process.
Section 3. Ambition and Tragedy.
This marks a heartbreaking turning point where ambition tragically collided with an unthinkable real-world disaster. In 2018, just after a Champions League quarterfinal appearance the year prior, the club suffered an unimaginable tragedy. The sudden loss of Khun Vichai in a helicopter crash right outside the King Power Stadium was completely devastating. And I mean devastating not just for the club, but for the entire city of Leicester. He wasn't just an owner, he was literally the architect of their dreams. In the wake of this profound loss, his role as owner and chairman was taken over by his son, Khun Thap. And Khun Thap made a very solemn, deeply emotional pledge. He promised to realize his father's massive, unwavering vision for a club that could consistently challenge the absolute elite for Champions League football. To honor that deeply personal pledge, Khun Thap pressed ahead with some massive, high-stakes infrastructure projects. The ambition was staggering, you guys. We're talking about a state-of-the-art, £100 million training ground designed to attract world-class talent, expanding the King Power Stadium capacity to 40,000 seats, building major revenue-generating infrastructure around the ground like retail outlets, a hotel, and even an indoor arena. And you know what? For a brief, glorious moment, it actually seemed to be working.
Under manager Brendan Rodgers, they won a historic first-ever FA Cup in 2021 and secured 3 consecutive top-8 finishes in the Premier League. But right behind the scenes, severe external and internal storms were quietly gathering force. Then came the horrific, unavoidable timing of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the club had already committed to the massive expense of the new training ground when the pandemic hit, which dramatically skyrocketed the cost of construction materials. The stadium development? That had to be shelved entirely. But even worse, the pandemic absolutely decimated the core business of King Power, the tourism and duty-free retail empire that Khun Vichai had founded. This is crucial. Leicester City was uniquely vulnerable to this specific global economic shutdown because their ownership's primary revenue stream relied entirely on international travel and duty-free shopping. Overnight, their financial safety net was just gone.
Section 4, the financial collapse. This brings us into the harsh, analytical reality of our next chapter, where the romantic football fairy tale gets crushed by the weight of corporate mismanagement. We often talk about sliding doors moments in sports, right? Well, this is perhaps one of the most consequential in Premier League history. In the 2020 to 2021 season, Leicester missed out on Champions League qualification on the very final day of the season. Missing out was totally devastating. Why? Because the immense broadcasting and prize money revenue from the Champions League could have actually justified the incredibly ambitious, highly risky financial strategies the club's hierarchy were secretly implementing in the background. Not qualifying put an already strained club under an impossible level of financial pressure.
See, after the 2016 title, Leicester thrived on a really smart, sustainable model, selling one major asset every single summer for a massive fee. Think guys like Harry Maguire or Riyad Mahrez, and then reinvesting that money smartly. But in the summer of 2021, under head of recruitment Lee Congerton, they completely abandoned that model. Instead of continuing to sell to buy, they bought Patson Daka, Jannik Vestergaard, and Boubakary Soumaré for big money without selling a single star asset to balance the books. At the exact same time, they made manager Brendan Rodgers the highest-paid manager in club history, handing him a record £8 million per year. They were gambling absolutely everything on future success. And when you gamble everything and lose, the numbers are absolutely terrifying. The crucial point here is that by 2022, spending had completely spiraled out of control, resulting in a staggering, unsustainable financial loss of £92.5 million in a single year. The gap between their past glory and their present reality was growing wider by the day, and the club was basically hemorrhaging cash trying to bridge it.
To put that into perspective, by the 2022 to 2023 season, Leicester's wage-to-revenue ratio ballooned to an astronomical 116%. Let that sink in for a second. For every £100 the club was generating in revenue, they were spending £116 just to pay their players' wages. That doesn't account for stadium upkeep, travel, coaching staff, or literally anything else. It is a mathematical death sentence for a football club. They had essentially built a squad they literally could not afford to maintain.
Section 5, Relegation and the Reckoning.
This total loss of structural and financial control resulted in the club literally sleepwalking into Premier League relegation. It was a complete disaster. Following that drop, the club had to shed weight fast, but they couldn't even do that profitably. 7 senior players who originally cost the club an incredible £107 million in combined transfer fees, were simply allowed to run down their contracts and leave the club on free transfers. That is £107 million of investment walking out the front door for absolutely nothing in return, right at the exact moment the club needed revenue the most. The corporate mismanagement here was just staggering. And it gets worse, because Leicester fell into a brutal bureaucratic trap. Yes, they did win promotion straight back to the Premier League the following year, but they did so operating with the largest budget in championship history. This triggered the Premier League's Profit and Sustainability Rules, or PSR. Normally, Premier League clubs are allowed to lose £105 million over 3 years. But because Leicester spent one of those years down in the championship, their permissible limit was mathematically reduced to just £83 million. According to the Premier League, Leicester breached this strict adjusted threshold by a massive £20.8 million.
The reckoning was swift and it was brutal. An independent commission dismissed Leicester's arguments and handed them a severe 6-point deduction in February of 2026. And the timing, it honestly couldn't have been worse. This penalty hit them right as they found themselves tumbling back down into the championship once again. The instability was rampant.
They were frantically searching for their sixth new manager in just 4 years after sacking Marty Cifuentes, engaging in all sorts of financial gymnastics just to mask a total sporting collapse. And the decision makers were once again shockingly slow to act. Instead of bringing in gritty, experienced players for a grueling relegation battle, they brought in unproven youngsters like Divine Mukasa and Dujuan Richards. Now, these kids are thrust into a deeply dysfunctional dressing room, completely lacking in true leadership, filled with players who either want to leave or know they're going to be gone soon. And dropping down into League One means an absolutely brutal financial reality. They are now being forced to cut their squad costs by at least another 20%. This means they have to strip away the final remnants of hope, initiating a fire sale of their most promising young assets like Ben Nelson, Abdul Fatawu, and Jeremy Monger, just to keep the lights on. It is an incredibly sad reality that the greatest fairy tale in English football history, a story of immense belief, joy, and impossible triumph, has turned into such a stark corporate tragedy. The overriding sentiment around the club today isn't just anger, it's a deep, lingering sadness. But, football is cyclical, so we have to ask, can Leicester City clear out the dysfunction, rebuild their broken culture, and rise once more? Or is the magic of 2016 truly gone forever? Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you in the next one.